The year was in 1985, and we were getting things like Megadeth's debut album, the NES officially launching in the United States, and the second season of the Transformers Generation 1 cartoon. Come to think of it, my favorite episode of the G1 cartoon might actually be the Key to Vector Sigma Part 2, airing almost 40 years ago. With that episode came one of my new favorite combiner teams of all of Transformers, the Aerialbots. I think the G1 Superion toy is one of the holy grails for my collection in the future, but for now, I think I have the second best thing. The Age of the Primes Aerialbots. I'll try and keep this all under 20 minutes, but no promises. With that being said, however, let's begin. Air Raid was the first one I picked up, and I thought this was a great impression for the full set. First of all, the painting and sculpting on Air Raid here is pretty good. The figure I feel captures the essence of the character, albeit most of the Aerialbots are kinda nobodies. Although Air Raid was my favorite for a time, for one, his alt mode, and for two, I liked his personality according to what the TF Wiki had to say. Though just to get this out of the way, one thing all the 5 of the Aerialbots have in common is their kibble. In this case, however, I think I can let it slide because this is what they looked like in the cartoon, so you can't really complain about accuracy in this case now, can ya? On top of that, Air Raid doesn't really have any issues standing up whatsoever despite what it looks like. However, one little nitpick I have with him now is that his deco is a little bit boring. Don't get me wrong though, he looks good and it is accurate to his appearance in the cartoon, but I just think it looks a little bit uninteresting now with his all white limbs and crimson vest. On a side note, does anybody want to take a wild guess as to why this paint on his chest is chipped to all hell? Anybody? Alright. As for Air Raid's accessories, he comes with 2 duplicates of his handheld guns, which look nice. However, at least on my copy of this figure, the pegs on the guns are a little too small, so his guns tend to flop around whenever he's holding them. I will go into the articulation on these guys a little bit later, but for now... Initially, Skydive was the one I was looking forward to the least, but now having him in hand... he's actually a rather good and more visually interesting retool of Air Raid. Yeah, they definitely share a few parts, but I think there's enough retooling to better differentiate the two in robot mode. Much unlike his inferior 3P counterpart, that being Zeta Toy's down thrust, the paint on Skydive's face is very clean and all the details are easy to pick out amidst the sea of orange. Admittedly, I do kind of wish his head was a tad whiter, but due to the transformation, I reckon it's an okay detail to change. Moving along to Skydive's weaponry, he comes with 2 brand new handhelds, and at this time he has a much better grip on his weapons than Air Raid had. The one thing about Skydive that I don't like is his vertical stabilizer. It's less that it's just on one leg or even that it's there, but in order to rotate it, you have to pull it partially out of the slot and then turn it around. Personally, I'm going to leave it facing down because that's the way I'll be keeping it for Gen and Combined mode. Other than that, I actually think Skydive is a very good improvement over Air Raid. When the first images for Wave 1 of Age of the Primes were unveiled to the public, I was slightly drawn away from Slingshot. However, once I got Air Raid, I went back to Walmart literally the day after and picked this guy up, and I don't think I regret it. Firstly though, I think Slingshot has the most boring deco of the 5, not just in robot mode mind you, but I think the main thing that drew me away was the arms, which in person don't look nearly as bad as they did in the renders. While the jet cockpit on his back is accurate to the show, I do believe his jet mode tail is also supposed to be up there too, but due to how his engineering works for combined mode, I reckon I see why they decided to do it this way. On the topic of such, the tail in the jet mode forms these ridiculous heels, so it's guaranteed that he'll never tip over, even with the junk in the trunk. As for Slingshot's armaments, much like the rest of his crew, he also comes with 2 guns. However, I personally prefer to mount them on his forearms instead, which I think looks really nice, albeit they are just handhelds in the cartoon. But as always, that's just my 2 cents, to each their own. I think I like Fireflight more than I do Slingshot purely because of the deco. On Slingshot, he only really had just white and a tiny bit of black and red, which to me looks pretty uninteresting. On Fireflight, there is a base color of red, which I think mixed with the shades of black, white, and blue and in these patterns just make him look way more visually interesting than his mold mate. I'm not sure why, but I love Fireflight's head sculpt. I guess it just may be the simplicity, and there's just some sort of huggability to him over all the others. I really don't know why I like it so much, but I'm totally for all these huggable Autobots. Other than that, however, he has the exact same accessories as Slingshot has, so there's really no need to talk about that. But I think the main takeaway here is that Fireflight's deco really does wonders for him. Now we arrive at my favorite member of the set, and the most ironic head case of a jet former. A supersonic jet. A Concorde, no less, who has acrophobia. For those who may not know, Silverbolt is afraid of heights. I'm not making this shit up, it's canon. Just watch the Key to Vector Sigma Part 2. That being said, however, since its last iteration in Combiner Wars, they definitely did Silverbolt some justice. Silverbolt looks and feels fantastic as it should, given it's a Commander class figure. I'm gonna be real, I think Silverbolt may just rival Armada Optimus Prime for being my favorite Commander class figure so far. Continuing on with his weaponry, Silverbolt comes with his handheld gun, albeit I think it's a bit undersized, but if you wanted to, you can store it on either of his wings via tab and slot, but it's not the most solid connection. That and my dumbass forgot to film the damn thing. Now let's introduce what will probably infuriate 99% of Transformers fans. Yeah, this is a Combiner skeleton currently in its battle platform configuration, of which Silverbolt can man to gun down some Stunticons. The only thing I sort of wish was that Silverbolt came with some blast effects like Siege Jetfire, but it's not a deal breaker in my eyes. If I had to rank these guys from worst to best in robot mode, I think my order would go Slingshot, Air Raid, Skydive, Fireflight, and Silverbolt. None of them are bad figures by any means, but I think it's more so how their decos serve them, of which I think Air Raid and Fireflight kinda have the worst, while Fireflight and Skydive actually have some pretty good color variation to them. Moving on to the articulation, I'm going to go over the articulation in both pairs of Limbots, so for reference, I'm going to use Air Raid, Fireflight, and Silverbolt. As for Air Raid and Skydive, both have a ball joint at the head with some room for some swiveling, tilt, and up and down, plus a transformation hinge if you want, albeit the range is a tad limited on Skydive. The arms can rotate, can move out that far, bicep swivel, elbow bend, no wrists, waist swivel, legs can kick forward and back, splits, thigh swivel, knee bend, the feet can move up, and pivot. Moving on to Fireflight and Slingshot, their heads range is ever so slightly different. The arms can rotate, but they both have trigger-happy shoulders, swivel at the bicep, full elbow bend due to transformation, no wrists again, but they do have waist swivels, the legs can move forward and back as well, splits again, thigh swivel, knees, no up or down at the feet this time, but there's still a deep ankle tilt. Lastly, Silverbolt's head has a great range of motion. The arms can rotate, move out that far, wings can move, bicep swivel, single jointed elbow with a decent range. Again, no wrist swivel, but the transformation hinge is there. Limited waist swivel due to the backpack. Front skirts can hinge to accommodate the ratcheting leg articulation. Thigh swivel, double jointed knee. Then, to end the segment, the feet can move up due to transformation, and finally, the ankles can tilt. Now, before moving along to the alt modes, let's do some quick size comparisons with the Figma Hamura Akemi, Figma Jean d'Arc, SH Monster Arts Biogoji, MPM Barricade, New Age Mista, my previous remaster the Figma Kyoko Sakura, the next review the Age of Extinction Optimus Prime and Galvatron, and what I have with the 13, and the Legacy Stunticons. As per the norm, I will not walk you through the transformations in this particular video, however, I will link a separate transformation tutorial down below if you want to go check that out. But without further ado, these jets are pretty damn good. For anybody who really cares, all of them are unlicensed, however, Silverbolt is a Concorde, Skydive is an F-16 Viper, Air Raid is an F-15 Eagle, Fireflight is an F-4 Phantom II, and Slingshot is an AV-8B Sea Harrier II. Silverbolt is unfortunately just cursed to forever be a robot block under a rough approximation of the Concorde, but I am of the opinion that this cleans up way better than the Combiner Wars version, albeit with Superion's head just hanging out under the fuselage. To me, Fireflight and Slingshot do the best job at hiding their robot kibble and actually look moderately aerodynamic, though I personally feel Fireflight's wings either needed to be a little bigger or slightly closer to the center of the fuselage. Air Raid and Skydive, however, I think they are possibly the worst cases in jet mode. Skydive does irk me the most in jet mode because I don't think an F-16 is a twin-engine jet and that rear end is far too wide for just a single vertical stabilizer. Air Raid I feel does it ever so slightly better, but on both there's really no hiding the robot bricks under their jet backpacks. Real quick to answer the question as to why this paint is tripped all hell on air raid, I could never get the landing gear out with my fingers and lack of fingernails, so I always have had to have a tool to help me out, which gets kinda irksome at times. On that topic, however, something that all 5 members do that I appreciate is that they all have retractable landing gear. Of the 5, I think Silverbolt doing it the best. Another nice feature is that you can store the weapons on the undersides of their wings, and I think that is a nice way to go about things, but we're just going to ignore that Silverbolt is a supersonic jet with a cannon on its underside. Now, if you felt like you wanted the closest thing to a Lockheed CL-1201, you can introduce the jet mode configuration of the combiner skeleton, slap it onto the back of Silverbolt to form a Super Concorde, or an MGO's headcanon, his space travel gear. Not gonna lie, I kinda dig it. Sure, it's ridiculous, but in my opinion, a good kind of ridiculous. Ranking the jet modes this time, my order would go Air Raid, Skydive, Silverbolt, Slingshot, and Fireflight. Again, I think the decos for Fireflight and Skydive do wonders over their mold mates Slingshot and Air Raid, where there's vibrant colors and some actual color breakup, over there just being endless stretches of just one solid color. Of the 4 Limbots, I think Fireflight is my favorite because to me, he's the most visually interesting of the bunch, and I love his alt mode. Before we move on to the meat and potatoes of this group, here are some quick alt mode size comparisons with the Earthrise Seeker mold, Legacy Skyquake and Dreadwing, Gen Select Cyclonus, the Core Class Seeker mold, this shiny prick, and Armada Starscream. Anyways, reintroducing the part where people like myself are either pleased or so infuriated, let's get down to combination and form us a Superion. Now riddle me this, is he a menace? Or... I'm so funny. Superion is actually fantastic. Yes, it is stylized thanks to the combiner skeleton, so it ain't gonna be one-to-one with the G1 animation, but I'd say it is a damn solid representation. I love the detail work on display, and now with all 5 members, Superion has this insane width, giving him quite the shelf presence. I also love how Silverbolt isn't just a gap filler, unlike what Fans Toys and Zeta did with their 3P MP Superions. Silverbolt actually forms about 2/3 of the torso and the shoulder connections, which I think is a wonderful carryover from Legacy Motormaster. I'm gonna be real, I personally don't mind the combiner skeleton for a couple of reasons. One of those being that if it were to combine in the traditional sense, like Combiner Wars, I can see this toppling over given you would be working with 4 deluxe budget figures and a core Voyager robot with parts forming hands and feet, as well as iffy combiner joints, and we saw how well that worked back in 2015. Being able to support itself with a bunch of sturdy ratchets fitted within a commander class budget, I think works way better in terms of solidity and stability. Another reason is that the individual robots don't have to worry about stability in combine mode, and they just plonk onto the combiner skeleton and kerblam! On a side note, the Limbots are somewhat Scramble City, but only with their pairs. If you wanted to, you can swap Air Raid and Skydive's positions, but neither of them can become an arm bot as they cannot split in half, unlike Fireflight and Slingshot, and the same and vice versa. Now, let's address a few issues, starting with one that some people have with this combiner, the leg bots. Air Raid and Skydive jut out quite a bit in their official configuration. However, if you don't like it like this, you can always just flip up the nose cones. Plus, if you so desire, you can store all of the individual's weapons on each of the Limbots, which I think is neat, especially with Slingshot and Fireflight. Now, one case of your mileage may vary is that on my copy on Slingshot's side, Silverbolt's foot likes to unclip, which can get a bit irritating at times. One issue I find a little bit more common is Superion's shoulder joints are a bit too loose. They can hold up their weight plus the combiner gun just fine, but it doesn't take much for the ratchets to just give way and sync with gravity. Cruising along, Superion comes with his arm gun, which can be wielded in his hand like the G1 toy, or if you wanted to do it the cartoon way, you can plug it into either Fireflight's or Slingshot's arm. However, unlike Fans Toys' take on Superion, this doesn't make you lose the elbow joint, as there's a hinge in the gun that allows for almost a full 90-degree elbow bend. And now, on the topic of such, at long last, let's take a look at what Superion looks like in motion. So I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently here, just doing the articulation live, so if the audio moves around, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to deal with it. So, Superion's head is on a ball joint, which can rotate all the way around, look up and down that far, and with a little bit of tilt. The arms can ratchet all the way around. The arms can move out of this ratchet joint, and you could also utilize if the arm doesn't pop off, you can utilize Silverbolt's ankle joints to move it up that way if you so desire. He does have an elbow swivel, the aforementioned 90-degree bend at the elbow, wrist swivel with the transformation hinge if you want to use it. I do kind of wish he had articulated fingers though. He does have a waist joint, which is a little bit limited due to Silverbolt's backpack, as you could probably see there. The hip skirts can move to accommodate the legs. Rotation to move back about as much as you need. Ratcheting splits and then some. Got a thigh swivel. The squeaky ratcheting bend at the knee. Unfortunately, no up or down, which I guess is kind of understandable due to the size and the weight, but he does have a great ankle tilt. At long last, so we can finally begin to wrap things up, let's do our final round of size comparisons with Figma Hamura, Jean, Biogoji, Barricade, Mista, the pair of trucks, Blue Bastard, the Primes, and Legacy Evolution Armada Optimus Prime. Now before we conclude this saw marathon of a review, let's take a brief look at every member's packaging. At long last, let's conclude this marathon with my final thoughts on the Age of the Primes Aerialbots. These guys are good shit! While I was never able to complete Legacy Menasor nor pick up that box set, I find myself liking the individuals way more than I did with my experience with the Stunticons. Each of these members looks the part, feels great in hand, poses very well, comes with everything that I think they need, and form a wonderful Superion. One could complain about the Combiner skeleton as much as I hate to repeat myself. Knowing the issues the Combiner Wars 1 had, I think this was the more ideal solution than having those Scramble City limbs and hand-foot guns again. There have been very few compromises outside of 3 of the 5 jet modes, and once it's all said and done, I think my initial excitement for the set has officially been justified. Now, where can you find this set and its price? I found Aerial and Slingshot on my local Target, and the rest were ordered off Amazon. All 5 members, to my current knowledge, are available for purchase on Big Bad Toy Store, the price of the full team totaling up to about $189.95 before tax. In comparison to the last Combiner finished, which was Revenge of the Fallen Devastator, which was near double the members and the price of this, I think the Aerialbots are a massive step in the right direction for Combiners to come. Lastly, do I recommend this set? Short answer, yes. Long answer, yes, I do. If you are a fan of the Aerialbots, want a quality Combiner, and don't mind the Combiner skeleton, then I'd say Age of the Prime Superion is a very worthy pickup. However, I can imagine that Hasbro will release a box set of the 5 in the aesthetic of their G1 toys, much like they did with Menasor, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see if that releases anytime soon. But as of now, I am content that the band is finally back together. So that officially concludes my review on the Transformers Age of the Primes Aerialbots and Superion, and as always, we'll see you all in my next video. Peace out!